Hi, I'm Robert Reeves, CTO of Datical. Companies today are exploring how to inject flexibility and cost savings into their database infrastructure using database as a service. One option is IBM Bluemix SQL database. Moving applications to the cloud will be a huge benefit to companies as it provides an easy way to provision database instances and delete them when they're no longer being used. However, this flexibility and cost saving will never be reached without Agile database automation. If you are still using time-worn manual efforts to deploy your database changes, any benefit you get from database as a service will not be realized. You will simply trade one problem for another. Datical DB provides a fast, smart, and safe way to deploy database change to the cloud. Using Datical DB as an on-ramp to the cloud, our customers today can fully realize the benefit of database as a service. So let's see Datical DB and IBM Bluemix SQL database in action.
So here we have IBM Bluemix, and this is my dashboard. You'll notice that I have one service running and one application. The service that I'm using is called SQL Database. Now this is actually DB2 in a shared hosting environment. So when you go to the palette, you'll see DB2 there. The one that is listed there, that is for a managed instance of DB2, of your own server. This instance that I'm using is one, free, and two, is in a shared hosting environment. So quite a few other people have DB2 servers, but of course mine is siloed and I only have access to mine. You'll also notice that I have this application running. Now the reason why I have that is so that I can get my connection information for the SQL database. The way Bluemix operates is that it is very easy to, almost like Lego, connect different parts of different technologies together to make a full application. And the way they make it easy is to make it, in a sense, automatic for your application to connect to the database. Now, since I'm using an external application, Datical DB, to connect to the database, I need to get some information about this application, specifically the environment variables. So if I go over here to environment variables, and what it's called is this vcap_services. It has my connection information. So you'll see that I've got a host name, I've got a username and password here. Don't worry, by the time you see this video, this instance will be shut down. And this is what I'll use to connect using Datical DB. Now that my DB2 instance is up and running and I have credentials for my instance, I'm going to connect to it using Datical DB. Now the project that I'm going to be using today is one that comes from our engineering team. This is our build acceptance for DB2 test. All of our testing is automated at Datical, and I think this is a good example to use for DB2 to not only exercise Datical DB, but also DB2 in Bluemix to make sure that it supports all of the things that we would expect from any DB2 instance. So the first thing I'm going to do is, after I have my project up and running in Datical DB, is create a step. I'm going to tell Datical DB where DB2 is. So we'll just call this Bluemix. I'll select IBM DB2. For my platform, and this is where I'm going to put that information that I captured in the vcap services environment variables. So pardon me as I do some Alt-Tab back and forth. Let's go ahead and get the host name here, and my username is right there, and let's go ahead and capture this password. Now the next thing I have to do is I need to put in some information about the database. And here it is called SQL DB. And I'm going to put in a label to make sure I capture everything in the change set. And finally, for the schema, that is going to be my username. And now we select test connection, and it was successful. So now that my new step has been created in my deployment plan, I'm going to select status. Now, because this is an empty DB2 instance, Datical DB is going to tell me that there are undeployed changes. And this is exactly what I would expect. It's telling me that I have a series of change sets that are in my change log that have yet to be deployed to this database instance. Now, normally, I would suggest that we always do a forecast before we do a deploy. But with this deploy option, I'm going to do both. I'm going to do the forecast and the deploy at the same step. We call that a full deploy. And it's going to include rules validation and change simulation. If it runs into any errors, then it is going to stop before the deployment. So we're going to do the forecast and deploy at the same time. So as we can see, we've got 96 changes to forecast, and it's running through each one to make sure it's a valid change, that it is not going to break anything on the server, that everything is as expected. Once that's completed, then it's going to begin deploying the changes one by one in order. And now that my changes have been deployed, I get an HTML report. Now, this is something that we can attach maybe to a change ticket or to email to folks to let people know that we have successfully deployed all of our changes. So at the top of the report, we see that it gives some system information. But because also we have some table impact summary information here, because this is a new schema, there's no data in it, there's very little impact. And then it will run through all the things that it did to our server. So for example here, the first thing it did was create a sequence. And not only do I see that it was executed, but we also see the SQL that was generated as well. And now if we go back to our deployment plan and select status, we'll see that it is fully deployed. And now I have my database schema fully deployed on DB2 in Bluemix.